Hi, and welcome to using MasterTrack to guide virtual math instruction and formative assessment. We've prepared this video in an effort to help support our MasterTrack users and schools as they work to restructure math instruction in light of distance learning. So let's begin by just briefly looking at some important guidance for this work. First, back in June, the NCTM and the NCSM issued guidelines and a joint statement called Moving Forward Mathematics Learning in the Era of COVID-19. And in that document, they recommend that we focus on using just-in-time thought-out interventions, that we really think about focusing our instruction on essential learning standards, and that we gather feedback on those standards from our students through the use of formative assessments, and that we use flexible and evolving groupings as we respond to our students' learning needs on those standards. So that is very much, as you know, that's very much the emphasis and goal and focus of a MasterTrack and our progress monitoring tool. To add to that, more recently in July, we heard from three prominent researchers, Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, and John Hattie. They co-authored a book called The Distance Learning Playbook, and they emphasize the need for us to know what our students know and what they don't know, and that we really need feedback in order to ascertain that, and that we think about how we are continually adapting our instruction to our students' learning needs. So, with that all in mind, we also know that there are some other important factors that we need to take into consideration, namely the importance of exposing our students to new material throughout the year, and also providing opportunities for enrichment. So how do we build a program, a learning model that accounts for all of these pieces, meeting students where they are, exposing them to new material, and then also providing opportunities for enrichment? So what we have tried to do here today in this video is to propose a learning model that might work for you, or at least might help you as you plan for the upcoming school year. And we've really broken this material apart into two pieces. The first piece is live teaching, so thinking about what your schedule might look like as a teacher, when you might be providing that kind of live teacher time online. The other piece really being independent student work that you're going to be asking your students to do during the week. So let's take a look at all of that, and let's begin by sharing with you kind of a sample schedule that we've built out for when you might be providing live teacher time for math instruction. Remembering this is just an example, it may or may not work for you, but the three main components that we have put in place here are, number one, establishing kind of a weekly lesson module that would focus on grade level instruction based on your scope and sequence. The second component is really the data groups that you see sandwiched in between here on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then providing some office hours. So let's talk about all of those pieces one by one. So beginning with the weekly lesson module, the idea there is to take a look at your narrowed grade level scope and sequence. I think most districts, most schools, most organizations are in the midst of doing work right now to narrow the scope of what you plan to teach for your grade level standards. So if you need any guidance on that, please do reach out to us, but hopefully you've been provided with kind of a narrowed grade level scope and sequence. And so the idea is that on Monday, you would be presenting kind of an intro lesson to kind of a chunk of that topic from your grade level scope and sequence. And then you regroup with your students live on Fridays to kind of recap and review. And the idea being that on Mondays, you introduce the material, but you also leave your students with a set of tasks that they are to do independently Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It might be practice work. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, what that would look like. But the idea is then you come back together on Friday and kind of take a look at all of the work that they've done independently and recap and review. So again, kind of the rhythm there is kind of having that intro lesson on that scope and sequence standard or topic. Meeting maybe in small groups on Monday to introduce that material. Maybe you do it whole group. Maybe it's a pre-recorded lesson that you've already prepared. And then Tuesday through Thursday, students are doing some assigned independent learning work that you've assigned to them. And then they're meeting again with you on Fridays through small groups or maybe whole group or whatever works for you, but to kind of recap, review, and do some practice work together on that grade level material. Then on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, keeping in mind that NCTM report and those recommendations that we know are so critical right now, now more than ever. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you will consider whether you might be using that time to work with data groups. In other words, reteach groups that you're building through MasterTrack. Maybe you're meeting with 3 different groups on a given day, maybe 2, maybe 4. It just depends on your schedule and what works for you. But the idea is that in the middle of the week, you are meeting with students on a routine basis to work with them on standards that through your progress monitoring with MasterTrack that your students need to work on. So using the MasterTrack small groups builder as you normally would to identify who those students are and what standards you're going to be working on in those data groups all week long. Remembering that this might mean that maybe you meet with some students multiple times in a given week. Maybe there are some students that you don't meet with on those data group days, but knowing that they've been tasked with that assigned independent learning that they can be working on, knowing that you have office hour time where you could be meeting with them if you want to do that. But the emphasis here is that fluidity and that flexibility and ensuring that we're meeting our students where they are. As for the structure of your data group, the idea in distance learning is that you begin your data group or your reteach group with an entry task. What we're recommending is that you essentially kind of share your screen and show a checkpoint on some sort of previously taught standard. And when your students arrive to your Zoom meeting or whatever your online meeting might be, that they get out their student notebooks. I think most teachers or many teachers are asking that students just have a notebook at home dedicated to their math work. So they just open up to a blank page and just do the work on the 3 checkpoint questions that you are sharing with them or whatever the checkpoint might look like. And they do the work in their notebook. And then once everybody has arrived to the lesson and everybody has had a chance to do the work, then having kind of a chance for students to share out their answers, share out their thinking, styled really much in the way of a number talk. So what answers did everybody get? Did we get the same answers? Did we get different answers? Do we agree? Do we disagree? Building on each other's thinking and maybe revisiting and readjusting our thinking as we learn from each other. But in the meantime, and we'll talk about this in a minute, you as the teacher are gathering that formative assessment data that is so critical right now to help us respond to our students' learning needs. After you've completed the entry task, you move into your data-driven learning. So whatever standard you've identified for that day that you're going to be working on with your students and doing some instruction and some practice with your students on that standard. The idea being that this be short, simple, yet data-driven, so targeted, and just doing some fun work together. Maybe you've identified some practice problems to work on together. Maybe you've identified a fun short video that's really visual and makes the topic really clear and conceptual. Maybe you're working with online manipulatives. Maybe they have manipulatives at home and you're doing some work together that way, keeping it really short and simple, but clear and concrete. And fun and engaging. And then when you finished your instruction and practice on your target standard, closing that session with an exit task. Our recommendation would be then to, again, share your screen with a checkpoint on a different previously taught standard, have students do that work in their student notebook. And when everybody kind of has a thumbs up and they say that they're done, then they can all flash their student notebooks up to their camera. The teacher can take just a quick screenshot and everybody is dismissed and can be on their way to get on with the rest of their day. But in the meantime, in the process of this data group, you've gathered 2 checkpoint data points, and also perhaps have gathered some formative feedback from the instructional piece during your data-driven learning task. And the idea is that you can be recording that kind of as you go. The other approach is in terms of addressing our students' needs who may need some enrichment work, knowing that you can build out enrichment groups for those data group days as well. And those groups can be working on enrichment standards. They can also be working on longer term kind of challenging performance tasks. They could also be self-led groups, student-led groups. Maybe they're tasked with meeting with each other. And maybe, you might pop in at any given time, but the idea is that maybe they're kind of independently meeting for those enrichment groups. Again, though, having that structure with that entry task and that exit task so we can continue to be gathering formative feedback from all of our students on previously taught standards. As I mentioned, the idea is that during these groups, you as the teacher can be collecting formative feedback and tracking that. What we have done to assist in that process is we have prepared formative feedback tracking sheets for you so that you can have those in front of you while you're teaching your small groups. So you can kind of prepare ahead of time, list out the small groups that you'll be working with that week, kind of knowing which are the 2 standards you'll do checkpoints on and which is your reteach standard. And then just be ready as you're kind of listening and learning from what your students are saying and doing. You can quickly kind of say, that student demonstrates mastery to me, so I'm going to just write down a 3 for that. Maybe some students are making silly mistakes, so they're going to probably be registering at a 2 in your mind. And then maybe some students seem just really lost during instruction, and so you would go ahead and mark down a 1. And knowing that you can then just easily pop that information into your MasterTrack checkpoint data collection account page. Let's talk about the third component here, which is office hours. So what does that look like? I think that can just be, maybe 20 to 30 minutes where you're just available online and students can pop in if they need to. It could be that you use that time to meet with specific students about something. We also would strongly recommend you consider making those office hours available to families as well. So to the extent that you have families that might be helping with instruction at home, knowing that they can pop in and ask questions during that time as well. And then that independent student work that we've talked about. So the work that you might have assigned to students on Monday that they're going to be working on independently Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So what does that look like? And so really, if it's work related to the scope and sequence weekly lesson module that you have set forth, maybe you've assigned some additional instructional videos for them to watch on that topic or on that standard, maybe a Khan Academy video, maybe a LearnZillion video. Maybe you've assigned some problem solving for students to be working on. And the expectation there being that they would arrive on Friday to small group work with you to discuss and review some of that work that they did. We also encourage and recommend that you assign independent student work for practice with online practice tools. So if you have a program like Extra Math going on, asking your students to do 30 minutes of fact fluency work on that program for their independent student work. And that can be easily tracked because you should be able to access that as a teacher to see if they logged in, what kind of work they did. And it also provides formative feedback that you can be adding into MasterTrack. You may also want to assign practice problems, work that students can be doing in their notebook on standards that might not relate to the scope and sequence weekly lesson module for that week, but something that you know they need to practice on. And then using discussion posts. So we really recommend using your classroom website, if you have Google Classroom or whatever it might be, as a place where students can comment on, they can post pictures of their work, you can post pictures of work, and then ask students to comment on that work and to respond and engage with the material. With in-depth discussion threads, so asking kind of challenging questions to them. Please compare and contrast these two different strategies that maybe two different students used, what makes sense to you, what doesn't, really kind of also allowing a place for them to be communicating their math thinking, which could be another place for you to be gathering formative feedback about how they're doing with the mathematical practices. If you want more guidance on that, please reach out to us. We have lots of ideas to support you with that work. We also would recommend considering doing like a Friday takeaway post where maybe another task is that students post every Friday, kind of one big takeaway from the week. An aha, maybe a wow, a wondering, those sorts of things that they can post. So really kind of thinking about discussion posts and thinking about how you can use those posts to gather additional formative feedback from your students. So again, here are those pieces now. We've got the independent student work that we just talked about, and then all of the live teaching pieces that we also talked about before. So we see this kind of break down into, for the student, independent learning on the left-hand side here in kind of teal green, the scope and sequence work that you might have assigned to them, for example, those videos that they might watch, some practice work during the week, and some discussion posts. And then as for your teacher live instructional time, your scope and sequence kind of lesson module that you start on Monday, you intro on Monday, you recap on Friday, your data groups on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then some office hour time where you're making yourself available. And as we can see here that this approach allows you to gather a lot of formative assessment feedback from your students through those entry and exit tasks, those checkpoints, through small group feedback using that formative feedback tracking sheet, and through the independent student work that students are doing through online practice tools like Extra Math and maybe through those discussion posts. To the extent that that feedback aligns with the MasterTrack standards that you as a school have decided to track, making sure that you're capturing all of that and putting it all in MasterTrack. So making sure that you're going to your checkpoint data page and ensuring that you're capturing all of that and inputting it all there, knowing that it doesn't just have to be checkpoints, right? That it can also be all of this great rich feedback that we're getting through online discussions, through discussion threads, through the online practice work from a program like Extra Math. All of that can be included here so that we are building out those small data groups every week based on really current and fresh information about our students. And kind of giving us then that whole picture where we're trying to do that balancing act, right? Where we're exposing students to new material from our scope and sequence, but we're also meeting students where they are and giving them the foundational support that they need to access new material, and then making ourselves available for those office hours. Some ideas for extensions, if you're interested in kind of building on that, is to use some of your live teaching time to conduct number talks, number sense activities. For student work, thinking about whether you might assign to students for example, some enrichment tasks, maybe for students who have mastered a certain skill that maybe they want to record some of their own student lessons and post those on your classroom website. So maybe those could be assigned instructional videos that other students watch. Giving students leadership roles, maybe having students lead some of their own small groups and you observe. Student acknowledgements and shout outs, maybe every week you're kind of circulating through all of your students, making sure that everybody's kind of getting an acknowledgement every couple of weeks. Maybe you have different badges or online stickers that you can be kind of assigning to students to help keep them motivated. Having student-driven tasks, so having students decide what kind of tasks they might want to be working on. Having student-led lessons. And then for tracking, thinking about whether you might want to be tracking how they're doing on the mathematical practices. You can do that in MasterTrack. Thinking about whether you might want to be tracking other subjects. Again, you can do that in MasterTrack. So just knowing that those are ways that you can extend all of this rich work that you're doing, and knowing that we are here to provide you with a ton of support resources. So of course, through MasterTrack, you're already a MasterTrack school, so kind of taking advantage of the support that we can provide to you. Also, knowing that you can lean on support from MasterTrack's partner companies, Rethink Mathematics and Abacus Consulting. The websites are listed there for your reference. Knowing from MasterTrack, you've got the progress monitoring tool at your disposal where you can gather all of that formative feedback, that you have those formative assessments at your disposal. So all of those checkpoints and that formative feedback tracking sheet that you can be using. And then knowing that MasterTrack is your driving force for building those data groups every week through the small groups builder, and also to build enrichment groups and practice groups. And then we are also providing virtual learning resources that'll be linked to your MasterTrack account page. Just as you would click for checkpoints and those assessments, you'll also be able to click on our virtual learning resources. You'll be able to find links to great virtual manipulatives that are out there, links to files that we've prepared to help you with distance learning. And then we also will have available to you a Zendesk, which can help you navigate MasterTrack and any questions you might have with that. Through Rethink Mathematics, please feel free to reach out to us for assistance with scope and sequence and curricular mapping. Rethink also provides those formative assessments. If you're interested in getting those in hard copies, in binders, if you need to send things home to families, please know that Rethink is there for a resource support for you there. And then please visit Rethink for free practice resources. There are a ton of worksheets and fun games that you can find there to support your instruction. And then Abacus. So to the extent that as your school year unfolds, that you're finding that you or your school needs additional support or professional development and instructional coaching in particular areas, Abacus can provide that support. If you need guest teaching or support teaching, so if you need extra hands on deck, Abacus can help run additional groups for you. If you're looking for sort of webinar support in particular areas of math, we have a webinar series available to you. You can access them one by one or access a package of webinars. And then we've also prepared a Facebook group called the Elementary Math Learning Resource Exchange. If you just type in those words, it'll come right up on Facebook. And in that group, we're also uploading files and curating a lot of great resources that we're finding online and sharing with you there. So lots of great tips for distance learning, great resources, all sorts of good stuff. So join us there if you can. And we are always here to help. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to Tori at MasterTrack or reach out to me at Abacus. If you already have my MasterTrack email, you can always reach me that way as I provide instructional coaching support for our MasterTrack schools. So we're just an email away and we're here to help. And we hope that this helps you kind of think about how you can use MasterTrack this year to structure your distance learning. Thank you so much.